Tēnā rā koutou katoa. Nei rā nā kupu tuatahi o te wā nei. Ko te mihi matakuikui ki a koutou e tau nei, kei runga I te kaupapa o te wā, hei kai roa o tātou nei whare. No mai, no mai. Haere mai. Firstly, welcome. Welcome to our house. Welcome to the meeting today. We're very grateful for you being here and with us at this time. An opportunity to discuss the path that Meridian's been on, the arc of travel for the last year, and give you our insights into how we see the landscape in which we currently sit and the ever-changing tides and wind shifts that are constantly a part of the environment. He whakaro anō, he mihi anō ki te ati awa, nā mana whenua o tēnei rohe, nā iwi o te motu, huri noa, me nā hapori o tēnā hoki. Nā whakaro nā tangi te poraporaki ki a rātou ko wihi ai ki te pō, haere atu, rātou ki a rātou, tātou taonga ora ki a tātou, tēnā koutou. We also acknowledge the holders of traditional authority over this area, Te Atiawa, and acknowledge the Indigenous groups that we work with throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia, and the wider communities that we work in as well. And stop for a moment and remember those that are no longer with us, that we've farewelled in the last year. We stop, we hold, we grieve for them, we farewell them and let them go, and bring our attention back to the purpose of the day, the opening of this space so that we might hold this conversation about your company. Nā reira, no mai, haere mai, welcome.
Thank you, Anaki. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chris Moeller, Chairman of Meridian. This is the second time that we have held our annual shareholders meeting in Wellington since our listing in 2013. But it is the first time that we have welcomed you into our own building, which, befitting the company's renewables and sustainability credentials, is in fact New Zealand's first purpose-built 5 Green Star rated building. It's good to see that we've managed to fit everybody in. There was a bit of consternation yesterday by some of my colleagues that we might not be able to achieve that, but it looks as if it's just about spot on. On behalf of the board and management, I welcome everyone to the meeting, in particular Justin Anderson and James Forsberg from the New Zealand Treasury representing the Crown. I would also like to acknowledge the attendance of Trevor Deed. Trevor's here somewhere. Yes, there you are, Trevor. Of Deloitte, the company's auditor. Meridian is a very health and safety conscious company. In the unlikely event of an emergency, you are requested to adhere to the following procedures to ensure your safety. If you hear the continuous sound of the fire alarm, we need to leave the building immediately through the closest fire exit, which is clearly signposted and can be seen by looking right from the doorway through which you entered. Fire wardens will also be present and will guide you to the nearest exit. If a warden gives an instruction to evacuate the building, then everyone must do so, even if the alarms cannot be heard. If you are in our reception area and the alarm has sounded, you can use the main stairwell to exit the building. Please do not use the lifts under any circumstances of evacuation. Once you are outside the building, please gather as instructed by the wardens beside Kumututo Park, which is just down here outside the windows of this room on your right, or alternatively beside One Red Dog on the south side of the building. In the case of an earthquake, please at the outset remain in the building as it is safer to do so, but move away from windows and any equipment or furniture which may be a danger if it was to fall over. Please follow any instructions given by the wardens, who may in due course ask you to evacuate the building or who may provide other directions depending on the situation. Moving to the order of business today, I declare the 2017 meeting open. The meeting has been duly convened and a quorum is present. The minutes of last year's meeting have been posted on Meridian's website and are held by the Company Secretary. I will now introduce the Meridian Board and Management sitting at the front of the room. On my left is Deputy Chairman Peter Wilson. Next to Peter are Directors Mark Verbeest, Mary Devine and Steve Reindler, all of whom are standing for election or re-election today. Besides Steve is Anarki Goodall, who greeted you at the commencement of the meeting. Along the wall and beside the windows are board members Jan Dawson and Mark Cairns. Finally, behind me are Chief Executive Mark Binns and Company Secretary Jason Steen. Meridian participates in the Institute of Directors Future Directors program. This involves an aspiring director attending all board meetings with full speaking but no voting rights. Meg Matthews is Meridian's current IOD Future Director, and I would like to introduce Meg to the meeting and would ask you to stand, please, Meg. Thank you. The business of the meeting is as set out in the notice of meeting and will commence with my chairman's address. Mark Binns will then review the group's performance, discuss current issues and share some insights as the outgoing chief executive of the company. This will be followed by a general question and answer session on matters relating to the management and operations of the group. We will then move to consider the 5 resolutions set out in the notice of meeting. Finally, at the close of this meeting, you are invited to join Meridian's board and management for refreshments. Meridian's new look integrated report has been made available to shareholders online, in keeping with our commitment to sustainability and to reduce our impacts on the environment. I will now move to my chairman's address. An important part of a board's role in conjunction with management is to identify trends that are likely to reshape or significantly alter the company's position to the benefit or detriment of its shareholders. The electricity industry, of course, faces a number of such trends, whether it is the continuing reduction of costs of renewable technologies, the rise of batteries as a means of solving some of the problems of renewable energy's intermittency, or the growth of electric vehicles. Many of the world's major economies are managing a transition from fossil fuel generation to renewable sources, which is leading to tectonic shifts in market dynamics that will play out in New Zealand over time. In addition, investors are becoming increasingly engaged and indeed activists about sustainability issues, demanding improved performance and reporting in respect of environmental, social and governance issues. Meridian was established as a company with a portfolio of renewable generation assets, so it is unsurprising that sustainability has always been at the core of our ethos. There is no doubt, though, that there is an accelerating recognition that sustainable environmental practices and relationships with shareholders are imperative for a company to remain relevant over the long term and represent a good investment. We are also seeing large institutional shareholders being prepared to publicly take action when the companies they invest in are perceived not to be up to the required sustainable mark. When members of the management team are presenting at investor roadshows, both in New Zealand and overseas, there are more and more questions about sustainability matters, and we expect this trend to continue. Accordingly, the timing has been opportune for us to review and refresh Meridian's sustainability framework. We have taken the lead from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, to which the New Zealand Government, our major shareholder, has committed, along with 192 other countries. The UN has set 17 goals that can transform our world, and we believe we can contribute in a significant way to a number of these, particularly in the areas of affordable, clean energy and in the reduction of New Zealand's carbon footprint. Our integrated annual report this year is designed to explain the contribution we are making to these goals, and I hope you will take the time to read it if you have not already done so. It clearly demonstrates that your company is operating at the leading edge of sustainability in everything it does. Moving from sustainability to our financial performance, in August, Meridian announced another strong result for 2017, despite encountering significant hydrology challenges in the second half of the year. This is the 5th consecutive year of growth in earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortisation, changes in fair value of hedges and other significant items, otherwise known as EBITDAF. And dividend payments to shareholders have increased every year since listing. These distributions have been made possible by the record levels of operating cash flows the company has generated, as shown on the graph in this slide. This in turn drives the company's total shareholder return, being the change in the share price plus dividends paid. Since listing, Meridian's total shareholder return is 132%, including a further 17% delivered in the last financial year. This is particularly pleasing when compared with the increase in the NZX 50 gross index of 10% and an increase in the MSCI, which is an index for all of the world's share markets, which increased by 15%. Accordingly, Meridian shareholders have done well against both international and domestic benchmarks. While it would be nice to take credit for this, all of the credit for this, the strong share price performance is partially attributable to the continued low interest rate environment that prevails around the world, given that Meridian is primarily a yield stock. The cash dividend yield of 6.4% based on the share price at 30 June remains highly appealing to investors when compared to the interest rates available in the United Kingdom, Europe, United States, Australia, and of course here in New Zealand. The fact that as a country we have relatively stable economy, political system, market and industry structure adds to the attractiveness of quality stocks in New Zealand. However, just how long the current low interest rate environment lasts is a matter of constant conjecture by economists. But at some point the cycle will turn and there may be some impact on global stock markets as once again investors focus on growth. However, growth is not exactly the term that one would apply to New Zealand's energy demand. As can be seen on the graph, there has been no consistent pattern in demand since 2011, and indeed in the year to 30 June, energy consumption was down 0.6%. on the prior year, largely due to low irrigation loads on the east coast of the South Island. However, trying to back out climate conditions and determine any long-term trend is difficult, given the number of variables at play. On the one hand, strong economic growth and immigration both suggest that underlying conditions are positive, but conversely, this is being offset, at least in part, by industrial and manufacturing closures, warmer than average temperatures, and improving technology and efficiency gains of appliances. For instance, the television you buy today is on average 67% more efficient in its power consumption compared to 15 years ago. Similarly, refrigerators are now 25% more efficient. The big energy efficiency mover for the future will be LED lighting, which has the ability to deliver 85% efficiency gains compared with traditional lighting. The net result of these technology improvements is that the average Kiwi household is using 6% less electricity than it did in 2002. Taking all of these factors into account, We still believe economic growth, electric vehicles, and more intensive use of appliances will drive overall underlying demand up by between 0.5% and 1%, or between 200 and 400 gigawatt hours per annum into the future. So we remain of the view that the right time for additional generation capacity will probably be in the window between 2021 and 2023, but clearly the assumptions on which this projection is made will need to be constantly reviewed. Recognising that New Zealand market has limited growth options and market participants are fighting over largely static customer numbers, maintaining and growing profitability in our main market is dependent on providing customers with relevant products at good prices and top service levels while containing costs. We have managed to achieve this in recent years, but it is an ongoing challenge, and we remain focused on looking for new avenues for potential growth domestically, including such things as the demand expected to be created for charging electric vehicles and batteries. Offshore, Meridian has been involved in Australia for more than a decade, and this market provides us with opportunities because it is going through a period of intense disruption. However, this disruption brings with it risks, particularly as a result of there being no bipartisan political consensus to creating a cohesive energy policy in Australia. The market currently faces an environment of volatile wholesale and retail prices and the potential threat of re-regulation of retail prices in some states. Our Power Shop retail business has now 100,000 Australian customers, and we are investigating the viability of supporting further retail growth through entering into power purchase agreements with renewable developers on the eastern seaboard. Indicative pricing to date has been very encouraging, both in solar and wind, and we are seeing prices significantly cheaper than where they were 2 years ago. Indeed, in the case of solar, they have halved. Our other avenue for international growth is to monetise our Flux Federation, formerly known as Power Shop platform, on other parts of the world. In 2015, the company agreed to franchise the platform to npower, one of the largest energy retailers in the United Kingdom. npower's satisfaction with the product has led to Meridian engaging with npower's German parent, Energy, with a view to franchising the platform in other European countries. It will take some time for us to evaluate this opportunity in terms of resource requirements and ensure that it can be undertaken on acceptable commercial terms. Nevertheless, we aim to make an in-principle decision by early next year, but a final commitment by both parties, assuming there is agreement, could take until the middle of 2018. In short, Meridian will continue to pursue earnings growth outside of New Zealand, but in a highly disciplined manner. The one significant disappointment for the year was the fact that the transmission pricing review was not brought to a conclusion by the Electricity Authority. However, we remain confident that the case for change is compelling and that the authority will re-engage on the issue over the next year, and when it does, it will do so with our full support. Looking to the year ahead, the most notable matter we immediately have in front of us is the transition to a new Chief Executive. Sadly, although all good things have to come to an end, Mark Binns will cease his employment with Meridian at the end of the calendar year, but the transition to Chief Executive Designate Neil Barclay is already well underway. The Board is delighted with how Neil's appointment has been received both internally and externally. Mark joined Meridian for the challenge of preparing us for what was New Zealand's largest initial public offering. The process was an outstanding success since listing, and since listing, shareholders have enjoyed a total return, as I said before, including share price appreciation and dividends paid, of 132% during the period of Mark's stewardship. a fantastic effort. On behalf of the board, management and all staff, I want to publicly thank Mark for the outstanding job he has done in leading Meridian through this crucial period of transformation. And Louise, seeing you in the audience as well, I'd like to pay tribute to what you've done for this company as well. Thank you. Neil's credentials for the role are exceptionally strong, having already served 9 years with the company, during which time he has held the roles of Chief Financial Officer, General Manager Markets and Production, and more lately General Manager Retail. Accordingly, the board is confident that Neil's leadership skills and deep industry and company knowledge will ensure that Meridian does not miss a beat during the transition period. From an operational point of view, the company got away to a slow start to entering the year with depleted water reserves following the lowest ever hydro inflows between February and June. However, perversely, there has been above average rainfall since July, not only in our catchments but across the whole country, which has seen wholesale and forward prices fall significantly. Consequently, the start of the year has not been optimal, but weather patterns can and do change quickly. In addition, we have a great trading team, ably led by Mike Rowan, to manage the vagaries of the weather, demand and water resources, just as they did in the first half of this calendar year. In conclusion, I would like to thank the members of Meridian's board, management, employees, customers, iwi, in particular Ngāi Tahu, business partners and our communities for their continued support. And of course, sincere thanks to you, our shareholders, for continuing to invest in Meridian. I now invite Mark Binns to address you for the last time. Which one are you? That one?
Take the slightly higher podium, Chris.
Some things never change.
Yeah. So, thank you, Chris, and kia ora koutou. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for attending. I think there's an argument that there's a better show in town at the moment. I think Jacinda gets her swearing in at 11 o'clock today, so thank you very much for deciding to come to our event. This will be the last time I will address shareholders, but it will not be the last time I attend this meeting. Next time, I'll be sitting with you, with the advantage, of course, that I'll know all the awkward questions to ask. So I'll spend most of my time talking about some of the things that I'll want to hear when I'm on the other side of the podium next year. But first, let me introduce you to the executive team. I'll ask you to stand up as I introduce you. First, Neil Barclay, who is the CEO designate and currently is a GM of Retail. Guy Waipara, who is General Manager of Markets and Production. Paul Chambers, who is our CFO. Jackie Cleland, who is our GM HR, and Ed McManus, who is our CEO in Meridian, Australia. And Jason, of course, who is our Company Secretary and General Counsel. And we have Sandra Pickering, who is our GM of ICT, who's currently on leave. Chris has commented on the year already, so I will be brief. But talking about our people, how do we perform in terms of looking after our people? Our safety numbers were good. We had no serious harm injuries, and our total recordable injury frequency rate was half the previous year's number. Numbers cannot measure attitude, and that has to be the thing that a chief executive has to worry about. Are we doing safety by painting by numbers, or do we have a deep underlying concern for the safety of our people and others on our sites and offices? I would not be so arrogant to say that we are the top of the league. We do miss things, but I believe safety is a deeply embedded part of our culture. Employee engagement remains strong this year. Yes, we have the best, lowest cost generation assets in New Zealand, but that isn't enough to sustain performance. I'm proud of our engaged, focused and talented staff, which is essential for any company to perform well over the long term. You'll note that in New Zealand we're on the cusp of being in the top 25% of the IBM top places to work, and we would like to exceed that benchmark. I'm sure Neil will be able to do it, and to be honest, I was hoping we would do it this year, but it's something for the future. In terms of our financial results, we can be proud of the numbers for 2017 financial year, given we were tested with the lowest inflows on record in the February to June period. At the half year, we were $20 million ahead at the EBITDAF level against the previous year. Unfortunately, the dry that followed us saw us give $17 million of that back as we took hedge cover to cover our position. This is the second bad hydrology sequence in the 6 years I've been with the company, and I can assure you we're getting better and better at handling it. Our EBITDAF saw a slight improvement on last year, the fifth in a row of improvement, as Chris has noted. So we had a very tight focus on costs and improved performance in Australia, which allowed us to nudge ahead just a tad. All of this allowed us to increase our total dividend to shareholders by 3%. But that is all consigned to history. Sitting where you are more interested in the future. So here's some thoughts on what I'll be wanting to hear at the same time next year. Starting at the macro level, we now have a new government with different priorities and approach to the previous one. I've read the coalition agreement, and to be honest, it didn't take long. And there are aspects that will have implications for the electricity sector. In a positive sense, the commitment to take a leadership position in the conversion of the government car fleet to electric by 2025-2026, where practicable, has to be positive. We're well on the way to achieving our own goal of having 50% of our passenger car fleet electric by June 2018. But converting New Zealand's total fleet to electric will take time. It's a positive for us, but not an immediate game changer. The Coalition has committed to an independent Climate Change Commission to advise on the setting of carbon reduction targets and to hold the government accountable for delivery. At the time, the Commissioner for the Environment proposed this in July. Meridian publicly came out in support of this initiative. Meridian believes that climate change is real, and tangible action over the next year should be welcomed by shareholders, given Meridian's commitment to New Zealand growing renewables. On the water front, not waterfront, but water front, we are supportive of the emphasis on water quality, and there will be few New Zealanders in disagreement with the intent. However, the devil is always in the detail, so understanding the framework within which this will be considered is important. Hopefully, they will be building on the work that has already been done. As anticipated, there will not be any resource rentals for water in this parliamentary term. And in this parliamentary term, I emphasise. I take from this wording that there is an intent to consider the matter and potentially go into the next election with some form of proposal. Meridian has always said that fresh water is an issue that needs to be resolved in a holistic way. It cannot be done piecemeal, and there are a lot of stakeholders involved, including iwi rights and interests, which remain outstanding. This is a complex issue, and this time next year we will hopefully know how the government intends to approach the matter, even if it is not directly addressed in this term, given its material importance to the New Zealand economy. Meridian has always been supportive of a holistic, equitable solution for New Zealanders. I would also hope that the government will have completed its full-scale review into retail power pricing. Retail prices have two large components. the price of electricity itself, which we make, and the grid and network charges for transporting it, which we merely pass on. As you can see from the graph, electricity itself has gone up at a compound 1% per annum over the last 4 years, about bang on inflation. Actually, it's just 0.1% in compound terms, less than inflation. Levels of competition have kept prices low, and they are likely to continue doing so. If the government wanted to look at some sacred cows for efficiency gains, it may pay them to look at the number of network companies in New Zealand, 29, compared to 5 in the state of Victoria, with a comparable population to New Zealand. The level of inefficiency that such a number drives into electricity costs is significant. They also might like to look at low fixed charges for low users. A well-intentioned policy, brought in by the Labor government by the way, that was meant to help lower income households on the premise that these households were low users. But when you see a number of people here at Meridian, for example, who don't fall into the low income household category qualify for this break, you know it is misdirected. Louise and I are actually on the cusp of this, so I view it as patently ridiculous that myself should be qualifying for such a basic subsidy. So there's a lot of detail in terms of coalition proposals that Meridian is keen to engage on with the government, but overall we are positive on what has been flagged to date. Narrowing it down a bit from the macro, I mean, where would we be if we had an annual general meeting and we didn't mention Tiwai Point? In the near future, it would be nice to hear that our friends at Rio Tinto have sold their interest in the Tiwai Point smelter. Not that I don't enjoy the cut and thrust with the individuals personally, but it has been Rio Tinto's stated intention to sell all its Australasian aluminium smelter assets for 5 years, and an improving aluminium market has not reduced their ardour. There have been media reports of discussions with interested buyers, but nothing has yet come to fruition. In my view, a new owner would be good news, as arguably Meridian, indeed the whole sector, has suffered from a share price discount for Tiwai uncertainty, and a new owner is highly unlikely to buy and then close it down with the associated remediation costs. And of course, our contract remains totally on foot. On our modelling, the Tiwai smelter is currently making very good cash profits, with aluminium prices being up nearly 19% since the beginning of the year. Personally, I will be surprised if the smelter is not here for the full duration of its contract through to 2030 and potentially longer. At the customer level, I'll be wanting to hear that we've stayed focused on areas where we can add value. As an industry, there is a great intent, lots of talk of new technology and, in my view, often little value for customers. I would want to see Meridian remaining disciplined in its view it brings to customers. Solar is one such area where economics have improved, with costs plummeting, and we have seen real opportunities open up for customers and ourselves. Over the last year, we have done a lot of work looking at a number of commercial and industrial users where the 7-day usage and network location gives us confidence we can offer certain customer groups solar systems installed and owned by Meridian that are right for customers economically and meet their environmental aspirations. That is a truly sustainable partnership. We have just signed a memorandum of understanding with Kiwi Property to install solar systems on 4 of its shopping centres over the next few years that Meridian will own, and I'll be looking forward to hearing that this is progressing well. The offer of a complete solution is something that is resonating with a significant number of commercial customers, and we are currently working with a number of well-known companies on solutions for their power needs. Expanding the horizons a little, I'll look forward to seeing Meridian's growth initiatives in Australia, the UK and Europe developing. As Chris noted, total demand in New Zealand has been low for some time, and demand growth forecasts are not high. Time and patience is required when developing new markets, but we're entering an exciting phase in Australia. The Australian market is not for the faint-hearted, with energy policy, or the lack thereof, never being far from the front page of the print media. But Australia provides real opportunities for a company such as ours, with smart people on the ground and balance sheet credibility. We have just signed off, and this is yesterday at the board meeting, on the parameters for the final negotiation of power purchase agreements with a number of Australian developers, potentially underwriting a number of solar and wind projects in Victoria and New South Wales. These arrangements should be completed within the coming months and will provide the generation to allow PowerShop to grow its retail base in Australia. Hopefully, this commitment to renewables will help PowerShop retain the mantle as the greenest retailer in Australia, which is held for the last 2 years, and a real acknowledgement to Ed and his team on that. In the UK, I'll be looking for an update on the success of npower with the PowerShop brand and platform, which we have licensed to them. We will add gas functionality in January, and I'll want to see meaningful growth in calendar year 2018. It will also be good to hear that we've been able to agree upon the terms of market entry into a continental Europe country with npower's parent company, Energy. Those discussions are currently ongoing. But what about the 2018 numbers? As you know, we do not provide forecasts. However, the dry period experience in the first half of the financial year has had implications for the start of the new year, as the swaption we have with Genesis remained active until mid-August. Just so you understand, I mean, as we start to dry up a little bit, we don't use our own power to supply customers. We basically buy it off Genesis in those circumstances, so the costs are higher. This has been countered to some extent by better wind generation in Australia and good customer load numbers. So it'd be good to see another increase in profits for this financial year, but it is still too early to form a definitive view. As you can see from the graph, there are a few lines there, but the dark blue line is actually our current performance. Well, sorry, it's the current level of hydrology that we have. As you can see from the graph, hydrology has now returned to more normal levels, which is great news for the balance of the year. So some final thoughts. Being given the opportunity to run Meridian has without doubt been the pinnacle of my career. Leading the IPO was a fantastic experience, but the real thrill has been in seeing the process being so successful for all concerned: Crown, staff, shareholders and all New Zealanders. I often note that the shareholder owns 51% of Meridian. That the taxpayer owns 51% of Meridian. So basically all New Zealanders. And virtually everyone who has been in KiwiSaver since 2013 will have been an indirect shareholder and the beneficiary of the 132% of total cumulative shareholder return that has been delivered over that time. New Zealand interests, by the way, last time we looked, I think it was last month, account for 84% of all the shareholding in Meridian. So any thoughts at the time of the IPO of shareholding disappearing offshore have been proven incorrect. To the shareholders, and a lot of you here have been shareholders since the time of the IPO, thank you very much for your support from the get-go. I'm delighted that it has been a very satisfying share for you to hold over that period, and no pressure on Neil for the future. To the board, thank you for the opportunity you gave me. I trust you don't regret it, and particularly to Chris Moller for your deft guidance, support and willingness to listen. And the executive team, a massive thank you. Neil, Paul, Guy, Jason, Sandra, Jackie and Ed, you've made it a dream run. We're a great team. And as they say, smart leaders should be looking to employ smarter people than themselves. They make you look good. Finally, it has been a real buzz to see an internal appointment with Neil Barclay as my successor. Neil has earned his stripes, having been with the company longer than me, and he's done all the hard jobs. I've done the easy one. He's got the experience in doing the hard ones. He's going to do a great job for you. While I believe Meridian is a better company today than it was when I arrived, I'm very confident that Neil and the team have the ability to improve on this again, and I wish them the best of luck. You always need a little ngā mihi.
Thanks, Mark. When you sit on the other side next year, just remember that half of the year was yours. And that may be a positive or it may be a negative. In the notice of meeting, we invited shareholders to submit questions in writing prior to the close of business last week. I can confirm that no questions were received by that deadline. Consequently, the floor is open for questions that relate to the management and operations of the business from shareholders, bondholders, or from anyone who has been appointed as a proxy or corporate representative. There are 3 microphones set up for questions, which you will see in the centre aisle of the room. If you have a question, please move to your lectern. Please move to the nearest microphone, introduce yourself, and then address your question to me as chairman of the meeting. I will then either answer your question or redirect the question to a member of the board or to the chief executive as may be appropriate. Please only raise questions relating to the management and operations of Meridian at this time and hold questions relating to the resolutions until that part of the agenda. Are there any questions or comments, please? Could you move to the microphone? We've got a webcast audience, so we have to use microphones for any questions or comments and replies we might make. Could you state your name, please?
Adrian O'Sullivan.
Thanks, Adrian.
Has the company got any initiatives relating to large-scale battery storage like the Tesla operations in Australia?
Mark, would you like to answer that, please?
The answer to that is we monitor batteries very carefully. Batteries most certainly have potential use right now for network companies in terms of reducing peak demand. But for the average consumer, I mean, the economics are still not strong. So we monitor batteries very carefully, but you have to remember that we have one very large battery and it's called Lake Pukaki. So, I mean, to actually replace Lake Pukaki, to give you some point of reference, with batteries is going to cost many, many billions of dollars. So short answer is we monitor it very, very closely. You're seeing prices come down, but at this point, they aren't at a level where it is economic for us as a company to adopt them, or in our view, consumers. It will come, but it's not at this current point.
Stay there, Mark, in case there are other questions. Adrian, thank you very much for your question. Other comments or questions? Gentleman down here.
My name is Neville Watkin, just a shareholder. I just wonder if the board or chair could just give us some indication of the ongoing dividend policy that you're going to adopt in the coming years. I apologise if it's already in the report, but I didn't actually see it. Just wondering, like for this year, the dividends seem to be, well, approximately equal to your net cash flow, so it was a fairly generous dividend. Thank you very much. And is that going to be sustained? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, Neville, I mean, we have published a policy in terms of our dividends. We've also got the capital management program that is running over 5 years, where we've committed to make payments of the sort of order that we've made this year. We plan on continuing to do that, subject, of course, to hydrology, subject to any other capital demands that may be required. So we would hope, we would like to, and if we generate the returns, be able to maintain and possibly increase dividends. But I can't guarantee it. Any other question or comments? At the back there.
Neil Walbrand, shareholder, comment rather than question, and just be the one to, on behalf of the shareholders, thank Mark for his tenure and fine management over the last 5 years.
Like that.
Thank you very much, Neil. Anything else anybody wishes to raise? Okay, thank you very much. Before we move to the 5 formal resolutions set out in the notice of meeting, I will briefly outline today's voting procedures. Voting will be by way of poll, which means it will be a secret ballot and you will need to complete your voting forms. Persons attending the meeting who are not shareholders, proxy holders or corporate representatives of a shareholder may not vote. This includes bondholders. Many shareholders who are not attending this meeting have already voted by proxy. For the first 3 resolutions relating to the election and re-election of directors, we advise that 1.89 billion proxy votes, representing approximately 74% of the shares on issue, were received prior to the cut-off for proxy voting at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, 24 October. You will see the final proxy count on the screen for the first 3 resolutions now. In accordance with the requirements of the NZX listing rules, Mark Verbiest, Mary Devine and Steve Reindler retire at this meeting and offer themselves for election or re-election. It is my pleasure to introduce and move Resolution 1 to elect Mark Verbiest as a director of the company. Mark was appointed to the Meridian board on 24 March 2017. The board considers Mark to be an independent director and unanimously recommends that shareholders vote in favour of his election. Mark, I invite you to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. My background is pretty well set out in the notice of meeting. I've got a lot of governance experience, particularly related to scale businesses. I've got a long history in the electricity sector that goes right back to the formation of ECNZ, separation of Transpower from ECNZ, the formation of the wholesale electricity market, the establishment and sale of Contact Energy, and until late last year, I was the chairman of Transpower, having fulfilled a 6-year term on that board. I've also got with all of that, understandably, I think you would accept, I've got a pretty good understanding of how government policy is formulated and changes over time, and the manner in which engagement with officials and indeed the government, not only its import, but how to do that in hopefully in an effective way. I've also got a strong understanding of technology businesses, not only at scale, but I'm an active investor in new digital companies. I've got three on the go currently. And for Meridian going forward, given technology change that's just affecting and will continue to infect at an exponential rate all sectors of the economy, I believe that's relevant to Meridian going forward. It was a privilege to be asked to join the board, and I can say my observations are that it is a very well-run company, both at board and management level, and I've got a broadly positive view on the outlook for the company, albeit that we don't control the weather as much as we would like. We don't, so it's subject to the vagaries of the weather. I certainly look forward to continue to represent your interests as shareholders with your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions, Chris.
Thank you, Mark. I move that Mark Verbiest, who retires and is eligible for election, be elected as a director of the company. Is there any discussion or questions? Doesn't seem so. Mark?
Thank you.
I have moved the resolution. I now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 1. It is my pleasure to introduce and move Resolution 2 to re-elect Mary Devine as a director of the company. Mary was appointed to the board in 2010 and was re-elected by shareholders at the 2014 annual meeting. The board considers Mary to be an independent director and unanimously recommends that shareholders vote in favour of her re-election. I now call on Mary to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to ask for support of the resolution to appoint me as an independent director of Meridian. I've been a member of the board since 2010 and I chair the Rem and HR committee. It has been an absolute privilege to be part of the company and also to observe such a talented and capable management team. My career background has been in executive roles, and in recent years I've become a full-time professional director. I also sit on the boards of IAG, Briscoe Group and Christchurch City Holdings. My commercial and governance experience has been beneficial in my role as a director of Meridian, in particular in the areas of customer centricity, retail and strategy. In my role as chair of Rem and HR, I keep abreast of all relevant trends, in particular in the areas of remuneration frameworks, talent development and succession planning. I have the time and passion to commit to the governance requirements of the Meridian board, and it would be an honour to serve you all, and I ask support for the appointment of a further term. Happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Mary. I move that Mary, who retires and is eligible for re-election, be re-elected as a director of the company. Is there any questions or discussions on that resolution? Doesn't seem as if there is, Mary, so thank you. I have moved the resolution. I now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 2. It is my pleasure to introduce and move Resolution 3 to re-elect Stephen Reindler as a director of the company. Steve was appointed to the board in 2008 and was re-elected by shareholders at the 2014 annual meeting. The board considers Steve to be an independent director and unanimously recommends that shareholders vote in favour of his re-election. Steve, I invite you to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I trained in mechanical engineering and worked in heavy industry at New Zealand Steel, and then in large-scale infrastructure development at Auckland Airport, and held a variety of executive engineering and operational roles in those organisations. I've been active within my profession. The Crown appointed me as inaugural chair of the Chartered Professional Engineers Council in 2004. I went on to serve on the board of the Institution of Professional Engineers for 4 years and became president of the institution in 2011. My skill sets are around whole-of-life asset management, operational risk management, and the execution of large, complex capital projects. I also take a great deal of pride in helping develop safe and sustainable workplaces. Currently, there are potentially disruptive technologies that may arise in the energy sector, and I'd have to say without doubt that it's a very interesting and exciting time to be an engineer in this sector. Meridian is a great company with outstanding assets that are managed by a very capable team, and the business is operating very well under their leadership. I consider the board management relationships to be highly effective, and I am very comfortable with the company's strategy that has developed. Coupled with this, I feel my skill sets are useful and complementary to the board, and given the good status of the relationships and the alignment with strategies, I feel confident of my ongoing ability to add value to Meridian's governance, and I am keen to do so. Hence, I seek your support for the opportunity to serve on this board for one more term. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I move that Stephen Reindler, who retires and is eligible for re-election, be re-elected as a director of the company. Is there any questions or discussion? Seems not, Steve, so thank you very much. I have moved the resolution. I now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 3. The company has received Resolution 4 from Mr Peter Wakeman, a Meridian shareholder. Resolution 4 seeks to direct the company to investigate other areas of business that reduce CO2 emissions. In support of the proposal, Mr Wakeman has provided a 25-minute video clip of an interview which can be found on YouTube. A relevant link was provided in the notice of meeting, and we have left the viewing of this material to the discretion of individual shareholders. Please note that Meridian takes no responsibility for and makes no representation as to the content of this video. For the reasons set out in the notice of meeting, the board recommends that shareholders vote against Resolution 4. The proxy results for this resolution are on the screens now. I believe Mr Wakeman is not present. Could Computershare please confirm that? Mr Wakeman is not present. As he is not present, is there anyone in the room who is a shareholder that wishes to speak to and move Resolution 4? If so, please move to the first microphone, just down here in the front, in the centre aisle, and when doing so, face both the audiences in the room and on the web so everybody can see. Please state your name, your shareholder number, and your address so that we can verify that you are a shareholder. This is important because we need to ensure that procedurally the resolution is validly considered by the meeting. Does any shareholder present in the room today wish to propose and speak to the resolution? Gentleman down there. Sorry, are you proposing the resolution?
No, I don't think we're in a position to propose it at this stage. I just have questions about it. It seems rather intriguing.
Sorry, excuse me. We'll come to questions. I need a mover of the resolution. So we'll come to questions.
Is it not better to have a discussion first, sir?
The procedure, and I regulate the proceedings at the meeting, is that resolutions are proposed. Having had it proposed, then the proposer can speak to them. I will speak on behalf of the board, and then we'll open it to questions as you wish to ask. In the event that no one proposes this resolution, I will reluctantly, on behalf of the board, propose the resolution simply as a procedural issue to make sure we can go forward with your question and answers. But I do not wish to propose the resolution as the board has unanimously resolved not to support the resolution. But if I have to, I will. So you will get your opportunity in a few minutes whether or not someone from the floor proposes this resolution. So could I invite you to leave your questions until then?
Very well. I will leave it to you to propose it if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the room who is willing to propose this resolution and speak to the motion? It appears that there isn't, which leaves me to do what I said I would. So in the absence of a mover of Resolution 4, I will, despite the board recommending that shareholders vote against the resolution, reluctantly move the resolution solely as a procedural matter in my capacity as chairman of the meeting. Having proposed the resolution, reluctantly, I now invite questions and comments from the floor. Sir. And I know you spoke earlier, and I'm sorry, I can't find my notes as to your name, so
I will repeat it. My name is Neville Watkin. My shareholder number is 330550180. Is that what you need?
That's plenty. I only really needed the detail if you were proposing it. Anybody who's in the audience can ask questions.
Okay, thank you. I did not actually take the trouble to look at that YouTube video that you mentioned, and I was just a little bit disappointed that there wasn't a little bit more information provided in the notice of meeting, sir, that might have made us perhaps feel a little bit less intrigued about the whole thing, because it seems rather, without having the benefit of looking at that video, I really don't know what it's all about. On the face of it, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable sort of a resolution, for Meridian to engage in, being a sustainable sort of a company. Resolution 5, which I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but obviously that's in a different category. But this resolution just seems to be, rather innocuous, and I'm just rather intrigued as to why the board is so firmly against it.
Yep, well, happy to speak to that. The reason why there is not more information in the notice of meeting is simply because Mr. Wakeman did not provide any further information. So it's not the company's responsibility to provide information about a resolution it is not proposing. However, I'll speak to your point because I hadn't prepared material around that. The board does not support the resolution and recommends that shareholders vote against it. This is because Meridian is a 100% renewable energy generator with a long-standing focus on sustainability and improving the environment of all New Zealanders, not just the company itself. As I said in my chairman's speech and as detailed in our integrated annual report, Meridian has adopted the sustainability goals of the United Nations for the benefit of the planet in general and New Zealand in particular. Indeed, our integrated annual report is leading edge in respect of sustainability, and in addition, we are only one of 3 New Zealand organisations that has been successful in securing a place on the Dow Jones Asia Pacific Sustainability Index. This is an accolade that is not easily achieved. As a champion for renewable energy, with sustainability at the core of everything we do, we always investigate appropriate ways to further enhance sustainability and improve the environment. In terms of Meridian itself, we already have a very small carbon footprint, and the board is of the view that the company is doing everything that is appropriate, sensible and commercial, including targets to convert 50% of our own fleet to electric vehicles, as Mark mentioned earlier, and reduce corporate emissions by 10% per person, both by 2018. The board some years ago established a Safety and Sustainability Committee which considers and monitors the company's CO2 emissions amongst other sustainability matters. As such, the board of Meridian is of the view that Meridian already investigates methods of reducing CO2 emissions in accordance with its strategy and considers it to be ironic that such a resolution is in front of shareholders today when the company is clearly an exemplar in the field of sustainability. For the record, I would note that the resolution relates to the management of the company and, if passed, is not binding on the board. So if I just paraphrase that, it's simply to say we believe we're doing everything possible already. If we were to recommend that resolution to shareholders, that would be tantamount to saying that we are not doing everything. That is the reason the board, in summary, decided to recommend shareholders vote against this resolution. Neville, do you have a supplementary comment or question?
Thank you, Mr. Moller. Yes, well, thanks for that address, and I find it, interesting that, that the board seems to be taking the view that it's some affront to be, given this resolution. I just wonder, though, if there is anybody here or at the meeting, either shareholder or board member or management member, team member, if they have seen the video, which I haven't, I would very much like to know if there was any specific areas of business that Mr. Wakeman was, thinking about, and could we just please know that?
Well, I have looked at the videos, as you would expect. I haven't spent looking at every single minute of the thing. They are very general in nature, and I don't think I or anybody here can actually paraphrase it in a satisfactory manner or time frame. My suggestion to you, Neville, would be, by all means, go away. The clips presumably are still accessible. Have a look and make your own mind up about the quality and of the content. I found some of it, I'll use the word, bizarre. I may as well just give you a little insight. One part of the clip relates to John Key and Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is of Tesla fame and batteries, going on a journey to Mars. Is there any further discussion on this resolution? Together. Okay, if there are no more comments or questions from the floor, I've moved the resolution, as you know. I now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 4. Resolution 5 seeks to direct the company to lobby the government to utilise debt-free money for the financing of climate change initiatives. In support of the proposal, Mr. Wakeman has provided a 46-minute movie, which can be found on YouTube. Actually, I now can't remember whether John Key and Elon Musk going to Mars was actually the second video or the first one. It was the first one. Okay, I am right on that. The relevant link was provided in the notice of meeting, and we have left the viewing of this material to the discretion of individual shareholders. Again, I'm sorry to repeat it, but please note that Meridian takes no responsibility for and makes no representation as to the content of the video. For the reasons set out in the notice of meeting, the board recommends that shareholders vote against Resolution 5. The proxy results for this resolution are on the screens now. As for Resolution 4, Mr. Wakeman is not present. Is there anyone in the room who is a shareholder that wishes to speak to and move Resolution 5? On the basis of Resolution 4, I'm expecting that it's going to fall to me again. In the absence of a mover of Resolution 5, I will, despite the board recommending that shareholders vote against the resolution, reluctantly move the resolution solely as a procedural matter in my capacity as chairman of the meeting. I now invite questions and comments from the floor. Are there any questions or comments? Neville?
Well, just by way of completion, I suppose. This resolution, I think, just on the face of it, I haven't seen the video, but it seems even more wacky than the first. So I don't think anybody will be really supporting it, and I certainly won't be either. Thank you.
Thanks, Neville. Anything else anybody wants to say? The resolution has been moved by me. I now put the resolution. Shareholders should complete their voting papers for Resolution 5. Thank you for your attendance to the resolutions. I now invite you to join the board and management for refreshments in the reception area of our building. On your way out to refreshments, I ask shareholders to please remember to place your voting papers in one of the ballot boxes you will see as you leave this room. Once all votes have been cast, they will be counted by the company's share registrar, Computershare, and scrutinised by the company's auditor, Deloitte, and the results will be advised to the New Zealand and Australian stock exchanges later today. As the policy of the board is to rotate the annual shareholders meeting around the main centres of Wellington, Auckland and Christchurch, we will be holding next year's annual meeting in Auckland. Thank you for attending Meridian's annual shareholders meeting. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.